This time is a special edition. Atlantis has been told as a story, but today I will organize its history and speak about what lies behind it. The Kingdom of Atlantis was a vast civilization that lasted for about 20,000 years, and about 22,000 years ago, its long history came to an end. I have touched on this in past videos. Atlantis built a society that was never inferior to modern civilization. Its city structures, its science and technology, its spiritual culture, all are thought to have matched or even surpassed what we have today. But Atlantis had one great feature. It was a civilization that developed without any contact with the outside world. No trade, no invasion. Its culture and technology were locked inside and matured on their own. That is why, when Atlantis sank into the sea, its science and knowledge were not passed to the outside world. Almost all was lost because it was not reflected outside. Atlantis remained only in myth and legend. Of course, it did not vanish completely. There were survivors. They scattered across the world. To the people of their new lands, they appeared as beings with strange knowledge and skills. They were worshipped as gods. Farming methods, the art of reading the stars, knowledge of building and sailing. These fragments became the foundation of many civilizations. In other words, Atlantis was a fallen civilization, but at the same time, it was the source of the ancient cultures we know today. This time, I will organize the whole history of Atlantis, how it began, how it developed, and why it perished. I will lay out this great flow and tell the story. As for the details, the events, and the people, I will reveal them one by one. In future videos, Atlantis perished about 22,000 years ago, around 20,000 BC. Why it fell, the details are in another video. Here, I will organize the overall flow. The history of Atlantis can be divided into three great eras. The first was the age of monarchy. A royal line descended from heroes ruled the land. They brought order and prosperity. But in time, tyranny and foolish kings appeared. The people rose in opposition. Next came the age of democracy. The people themselves governed. It lasted for about 10,000 years, but factional strife and distortions in the system led to civil war. The last was the age of priestly rule. Priests and nobles suppressed the chaos with force. They seized great power and built a controlled state. In each of these three eras, there was both prosperity and turmoil, and many lessons remain for us to learn today. First, let us begin with the older Lemurian age. Around 40,000 BC, after the Lemurian age, the Kingdom of Atlantis was born. The Lemurian age was an incredibly long era of peace. People lived in harmony with nature. They used magic in their daily lives, but that peace was broken by the invasion of another nation. A country called Saxon attacked Lemuria. At that time, the House of Atlantis rose up. They defeated Saxon and protected Lemuria. From that battle, the Kingdom of Atlantis was established. The transition from Lemuria to Atlantis. This is a very fascinating theme. Someday, I want to cover it in detail in another video. The people of Lemuria were able to use magic, but as Atlantis advanced in technology, the power of magic was gradually lost from spirituality and the power of nature to science, technology, and systems. This very change tells the great feature of the civilization. The first era of Atlantis was monarchy. A royal family, descended from heroes, ruled the land. At first, they brought order and prosperity. There was even a vow to destroy weapons and dissolve the army to avoid war and preserve peace. But as time passed, the royal dictatorship grew. Foolish kings appeared. They ruled as they pleased. They ignored the lives of the people. As a result, the people's dissatisfaction rose. At last, a movement began to take back politics into their own hands. The king remained only as a symbol. Real power was lost. Next came the age of democracy. It lasted for about 10,000 years. The people joined politics. Through the parliament, they moved the nation in a different way than in the age of monarchy. But in time, the system began to distort. The parliament tried to accept every voice. Gradually, it fell into dysfunction. Factional politics spread. Conflicts of opinion grew fierce. At last, neighbors began to doubt neighbors. Blood was shed against blood. It became civil war. The kingdom of Atlantis faced a crisis of survival. The chaos was ended by the priests, that is, the nobles. They used force to suppress the civil war. They unified the nation, but in return, the priests seized great power. They built a system of total control over society. First, they organized a secret police. The people were placed under surveillance. Any words or thoughts against the regime were thoroughly exposed. People were forced to live in constant fear. Free speech was forbidden. Gatherings were not allowed. Society was ruled by silence and obedience. Furthermore, the energy that sustained civilization, the power of the great crystals, was monopolized by the priests. The crystals were rationed. The people could not use their power without priestly permission. By controlling energy supply, the priests completely ruled the lives of the people. On the surface, a commoner's parliament existed, but it was only a name. In reality, it was under priestly control. Elections were held, but they were mere rituals. The results were decided in advance. The people seemed to participate, but in truth, they had no power at all. Thus Atlantis regained order, but lost freedom. Inequality and oppression deepened. The rule of the priests continued for a long time, but their rigid system eventually drained the vitality of the civilization. The history of Atlantis continued through three systems: monarchy, democracy, and priestly rule. In each era, there was both prosperity and turmoil, and many lessons remain for us to learn today. Atlantis is not just a legend. It is glory and decline and the accumulation of human choices. I will continue to share the truth of Atlantis in future videos. Please watch them. For a while, I will focus on videos about the time when Atlantis perished. Next, I will speak about the civilization of Atlantis. Atlantis was not just myth or legend. In reality, it was a civilization as advanced as the modern world. Its city structures, its science and technology, its spiritual culture, all were equal to or greater than what we have today. The people lived under advanced systems in architecture, in medicine, in education, in energy, in agriculture, in marine technology. In every field, they achieved unique progress. But Atlantis had one great feature. It was a civilization that developed without any contact with the outside world. No trade, no invasion. Its culture and technology were locked inside and matured on their own. Because of this, flight technology, such as airplanes or spaceships, hardly developed. There was no need to aim for the sky. For the people of Atlantis, the sky was for observation, not for conquest. They could read the stars, but they had no way to reach them. Instead, their technology for the sea was astonishing. Atlantis was a civilization surrounded by the ocean. The sea was the center of their lives. Shipbuilding was highly advanced. Long voyages were possible. Deep-sea exploration was possible. Vehicles existed, with structures like submarines, and the technology to build underwater cities was established, to build cities under the sea and to live within them. That is still a dream today, but in Atlantis, it was reality. Because many people lived on limited land, they devised clever ways to use space. Underwater gardens and underground farms were developed. The technology to turn seawater into fresh water was highly advanced. The water circulation system was nearly perfect. They had the wisdom to make full use of limited resources. In the cities, tall buildings stood crowded. By using vertical space, they managed population density. Their appearance was like a city of the future. But even Atlantis had problems it could not solve. That problem was energy shortage. Atlantis depended entirely on crystal energy. The crystals were a renewable source. They were environmentally friendly and extremely powerful. But regeneration took time. As the population grew and the cities expanded, the supply of crystals could not keep up. The shortage of energy affected every part of society. Transport, agriculture, medicine, communication, all depended on crystals. Delays in supply threatened life itself. This problem also had a deep impact on politics. Conflicts arose over the distribution of crystals. Factions were born. The system began to distort. Who would manage the crystals? Who would receive priority supply? Over these decisions, the royals, the people, and the priests clashed fiercely. In time, the crystals became not just an energy source, but power itself. Atlantis may have surpassed the modern world in technology, but in energy, they always faced limits, and those limits led to the collapse of the civilization. The history of Atlantis was glory and suffering, and the accumulation of human choices. To know how it developed is to reflect on our own future.